recording the session again, just like we did last time, and fingers crossed we don't run into any internet issues. So the bad news is that it's happened to me twice since then, but the good news is that it's been up and running all day. So fingers crossed that everything goes okay. Now, some of you on the phone with me today probably attended the first part of that little session I tried to run last time, where I kind of only got halfway through that. Would it be helpful for you guys if I just started again at the beginning and just quickly kind of went over those items again?
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, perfect. Okay, good. Okay, guys, so we don't necessarily use the scheduler per se when it comes to billing, but you could, right? When you're on a scheduled appointment for a patient and you want to bill that one particular patient, or you want to work directly with their invoice, you could in theory use that little icon that's up on the function bar that looks like a little envelope. So that's how you're going to invoice that particular patient. The kind of invoicing that we're really talking about today is more of the bulk billing that tends to happen, the kind of stuff that you want to do at the end of the day, or you want to bill all your insurance companies at the same time, or print out all your HCFA claim forms at the same time. So we call that batch billing. So that's more the focus that we usually do today. So the way that you lead up to billing, though, does all come from the scheduler, right? It's all those 3 steps initially that get you to the point that you have something to bill. So you have patients that are set up in a certain way. They're connected to different payers, different insurance companies. They've been set up with copays or deductibles, or however you're handling a copay entry, a coinsurance, a deductible entry at your clinic. You have appointments for those patients. They're arriving for their appointments. You're charging them, and then you end up with something to bill. So that's kind of where we're at, where we've done all those steps, and now we have something to bill. So just a reminder, when you are balancing yourself at the end of the day, you kind of want to make sure potentially that you haven't missed anything, right? So the first check at the end of the day, I'm just going to circle my day here, is always that visual check, right? Everybody that has arriving symbols should probably have treatment or assessment entry symbols, and they should probably have little notes that have been completed on them as well. So we're really interested in people arriving or completing, and we're making sure that they have some kind of treatment or assessment that's been entered against them. We kind of don't want it to look like that little guy. And I've drawn all over the screen, so let me change that again. But this little guy here is probably going to show up on a report for us, our daily reconciliation report, stating that the system is confused. It's saying Mr. Tuss Copay seems to have an appointment on the 21st with Heather. It appears that they did arrive for that appointment based on their status of attendance, but it's not seeing any kind of treatment or assessment. It's not seeing a little white hand on the appointment. So that particular person would show up when you run your reports at the end of the day and you run your daily reconciliation report. Okay, does everybody know what I'm referencing when I say daily reconciliation report? And I just want to make sure, I just changed my screen. Can you guys still see my screen?
Nope.
No. Gray Mountains.
Gray Mountains again. One more second. Okay, how about now? Can you guys see my screen now?
No, still Gray Mountains.
Nope. Yeah.
Good. Let's try one more thing. How about
there
now?
You are.
Excellent. Okay. I just switched screens because I think you weren't seeing my little drop down here at the top of the screen, so I just want to make sure you could actually see where I get those reports from. So the daily reconciliation report comes from the report drop down, operations, daily reconciliation. So that's one of the reports. We probably talked about it a lot in session number 2 together. That's the report that kind of points out some summaries that have happened during the day. Most importantly, I think you've missed these people. It's looking for the appointments that don't have the little white hands. And then the next report that you run is that revenue report, right? You look at just the little white hand entries to make sure that you're happy with them. If you're at a clinic where the therapists are the ones entering those little white hands while they're in a clinical note, you're checking their work, so to speak. You're making sure that the story makes sense billing-wise. If they've entered 3 units of a code, they probably want to have matching time of 45 minutes, right? If they enter 20 minutes, that would probably be an issue. You would have to confirm, is that really 2 units or did you record the wrong amount of time? So checking those things in detail, daily rec, then the revenue report, that's what's giving you fast billing. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the billing. So I find the fastest way to bill is actually to go to the word payers on the left-hand side of the screen, and you're dealing with all your different insurance companies. Sometimes you have a whole whack of different insurance companies that you're trying to bill at the same time. So you can manually go through the list yourself and put little flags next to the insurance companies that you would like to work with, or you have functions that can help you flag as well. So there is a little function at the top with 2 red flags and a little question mark, and that can find certain insurance companies for you. It can find things by a criteria. So an example might be if you're about to bill all your paper HCFA claim forms, you might say, Practice Perfect, can you please find all the payers where I've set the invoice style as a paper HCFA claim form? And then the system will go through and try to flag everybody that meets that criteria. Okay, so the first step is usually flagging something in common, flagging all your insurance companies, flagging just the paper ones, flagging all your motor vehicles, but you flag a few usually at the same time. After you flag, it's always a function that you choose next. So it's always a little picture off the function bar. So at this point, we want to produce invoices for those payers. And now we have some options as to what dates of service we want to invoice for. So if you just kind of move along quickly and you don't make any selections, the system automatically assumes you want to bill everything that hasn't already been billed. So that's always the first option. But you could be specific. You could say, no, I just want to bill for stuff last month. I just want to bill for services where the date of service is February 1st to February 6th. So you can tell the system specifically. If you do have multiple locations, you could bill all your locations at the same time, or you could just bill one out of the list. And then from there to keep moving forward is an okay. So if the system does find something, you'll get the next screen where your options are to post it, to send it potentially, create a file, preview it. You always typically want to preview first. And depending on what it is that we're creating, so in my example here, I've said, let's bill all the insurance companies I've set up for paper HCFA claim forms. I've set my preview to show me the actual HCFA claim form, as if this is it, this is how I'm going to bill it. So the system is going to produce a list of all the patients, all the services that need to get billed out right now and show it to me as it's going to look on a HCFA claim form. Okay, so I'll describe this view as you do the work. You get to see the form and how it's going to print, but you technically have to do the work. You have to figure out, oh, I wanted something in box 9B. It's not there. I have to go back and fix that. Oh, I'm missing the patient's birth date. I have to go back and fix that. So the system really isn't giving you a heads up on anything. It's just showing you as exactly how it's going to look. Okay. The other preview I want to show you, I'm going to unflag that payer. The other preview is called a data review, meaning we kind of do the work for you. We do a little scrub on your file and try to tell you things that are missing. So if we look at it a different way, if we say, okay, system, can you please find all the payers that I've got set up to go on a HCFA electronic submission? And the system flags a few insurance companies, and we go through the same steps. We say, let's produce the invoices, let's produce for anything that's ready to go for just my one location or all my locations. Now my options start to change a little bit. I no longer get a print option on the left. I get more of a let's produce a file, let's prepare a file and save it. But I do also have a preview. option. So again, we always want to go to that preview. This time the preview should look a little bit different. It's not the actual HCFA claim form. Now it's more of a, we're telling you what's wrong or potentially wrong with a comment. So when you do your preview before billing, if you choose this style, which is called a data review, any comments that show up on the right-hand side, in theory, would be not a good idea to submit. It's usually something that the insurance company or the clearinghouse needs, and the system is trying to say, we just don't have what they need. This is what you're missing. Okay, so typically it would point it out to you. It's telling me right now I've got the wrong kind of diagnostic coding in my system that I'm using on this patient. It might say I'm missing an address, a birth date, a phone number, a policy claim number, insurance ID. It's going to kind of spell it out. And sometimes on that little message, you'll see these little numbers that appear beside them. That is trying to equate it to a box on a HCFA claim form. So this little message is saying you've got the wrong diagnostic code, and box 21 is what's needed on the HCFA claim form in that particular message. Okay, so in theory, if there's a little comment, you would stop the process, cancel out of this, go back to the patient, try to fix that entry in their history, and then come back in and do it again and see if we can get rid of that comment. Okay, the third type of file that sometimes you're producing in here is called an Edi file. In fact, it has lots of different nicknames. It's called an Edi file, an 837p, a 5010, an ANSI file. Those are all the same things, believe it or not. So on your list, if we tell the system, let's find all the insurance companies set up for an Edi file, again, it'll go through and try to flag everybody that meets that criteria. If we go next to the same step, let's produce invoices, same choices. Let's produce all invoices that need to go for this one location. My preview looks almost identical to a HCFA electronically. It's just now the system is looking for whatever that type of file needs. And my comments tend to get a little bit more complicated. So no matter what, the comment on the right-hand side usually means you're missing something and you're just trying to distinguish what that little message means and where you would go fix that information. And if you're not quite sure what to do with those messages, by all means, just let us know at support what it's saying and then we can direct you. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out of there. So the settings that you can enable or change for those different styles of your preview come from the settings drop-down, and your HCFA claim forms, electronic or paper, those settings are here, and your EDI format files are here. So just a quick review, EDI files need a whole bunch of different information. They usually need the name of your clearinghouse with your submitter and receiver identifying numbers. They also need all your payer identifier numbers as well. That's part of the comment in my particular example. It's saying I'm missing all that stuff. Okay, when you're in the settings, if you go to the general tab for either format, you can choose the file or the location as to where the file is going to be saved on your computer. So remember, when it's an electronic format, Practice Perfect just simply makes the billable file for you, saves it on your computer, wherever it was told to save that file, and you take the file from that location, and that's when you upload it to the clearinghouse. Okay. Okay, so all of those files until that moment would be called Unbuild. So billing equals invoicing. So up until the point that we actually commit to that transaction and produce that file, send the file to the clearinghouse, print that HCFA claim form, all those services are called Unbuild. And there's actually a report in your financial section that keeps track of all those unbilled services at any time. So sometimes people run this report before they do their billing. They want to look at all their billing and double check it before they start going through their batch billing. Some people run that report after they think they've billed everything. They want to make sure nothing still remains on that report if they think they just billed all their HCFA claim forms. Okay. Once you bill it, once you commit to that invoice and print it and send it to the clearinghouse, it then becomes accounts receivable. So it moves the number to a different report called Accounts Receivables by Invoice, and that's the report that's aging. So that report is showing invoices that have been issued that haven't been paid yet, and it's aging those invoices by the date of the invoice. Okay, and then as we start posting payments, it turns up back in the payment journal. So before I show those reports, I just want to go to the client listing now and just show you the process for batch billing clients. It's virtually the same. It's all about where you start. So if we're looking at my client listing right now, my options are exactly the same. I can flag manually the patients that I want to batch bill at the same time. I could use my 2 red flags. I could say, find for me, please, system all my private paying patients, find for me all my patients connected to Heather, some kind of criteria. But the first step is always flagging. And then from there, it's always a function. So it's the same function. We want to produce invoices for those patients. Same exact options, choose our date ranges, choose our locations. And typically at this point, the system is going to preview or give us paper, generic, normal, standard, everyday invoices. It's not usually something we're going to upload on a file somewhere. It's usually something we're going to either print on paper or email to the client directly, but it looks like what we call a generic type of invoice. Okay. And if you do it that way, it would batch bill all your patients. So it's only grabbing, even though I flag everybody on this list, it's only grabbing invoicing at this point for patients on our list that need to be invoiced, patients that have services in their name that need to be produced and invoiced. Okay. Another thing that you can do while we're here flagging all our patients is statements. So statements are something just a little bit different in our system than an invoice. So those are 2 separate things. So invoicing in our system is the only way that a number technically moves from one column to another column. So let me just see if I can find a patient in here in their history that has some numbers here. So on the right-hand side, the charge column, getting numbers in someone's charge column, whether it's a payer, whether it's a patient or payer, it's done by the little hand. So in theory, everybody showing up for an appointment gets a charge. The only way that charge, remember, moves into the build column is if we create an invoice for that charge. That's the only way it's called build in our system. So up until that point, it would always be referenced as unbilled. And then from there, the only way to get it into the paid column is to record a payment against it. Okay. So if we talk about payments now, as we move along, let's go back to our payer listing and let's focus on, I'm just going to pick on the first insurance company at my list here. So a couple of different ways that you can get a payment, especially from a payer. Typically, they're going to send you what's called a bulk payment. You're probably going to get electronically some kind of file, an ERA file or some kind of remittance file from your clearinghouse or from the payer that's paying many patients all at the same time. It's an electronic file that's got programming in it, and it tells the system kind of where to post all that information. So if you do get one of those from your clearinghouses, you typically download the file to your computer, and then in Practice Perfect, that would be called an action. So when your actions drop down, you have the capability of importing or grabbing that remittance file from your computer. So when you say import that EDI 835, that remittance file, you get this little screen, and when you click on your little yellow icon, you browse through your computer and you try to find your EDI file, your remittance file that you just downloaded. And then once you find it, you can record a date of payment if you don't want it to be today. And then you'll hit the process button. And then the system will process the payment. You'll kind of see it all happen on the screen, and you'll get the process. And the system will spit out a report typically at the end of that, listing all the things that it found a match for payment and how it posted it. It'll give you a list of all the things it couldn't find at all, and it will give you a list of all the things it found that couldn't post because maybe a rejection. Okay, so that's called an electronic remittance file. That's when the system kind of does all the posting for you, and then you can always go back and reverse some of those transactions or fix those transactions if you didn't want them to happen. A manual posting is also something that can happen. So you may get notified electronically of an EOB, but you still get a manual check, or you get, or you don't get the remittance file and you have to post things manually. So in that case, you would start the same way. You would go directly to the insurance company off of your list of payers, and typically you flag that payer. You always identify who you want to work with. From there, it's always going to be a function, so you would typically go to activities by invoice. And activities by invoice, which of course I have no invoices, would show us all the invoices that are outstanding for this payer. And then you would start to flag off that list all the patients, all the insurance, all the invoice numbers that you want to pay at the same time. So typically you'd flag a whole bunch of things. Because you have flagged something, again, your next step is going to be a function. So you would choose, let's make a payment. And your screen would be rather large. You'd have tons of patients, tons of dates of service, all being paid at the same time. But if you just break it down, it's pretty much like a single payment. You just have many things all at the same screen. You still pick a date. You still pick a method of payment. You still enter the actual amount of the payment. It's not, in fact, it's hardly ever what you bill them. They oftentimes pay less than what you bill. And then sometimes you reference some kind of EFT or check number. On the right-hand side, should there be a difference between what you bill and what they pay, and you have to get rid of that balance to the books, you would decide what you're going to call that. Is that a write-off? Is that a write-down? Do you want to make up another method, another adjustment method in your settings? But you would select what you want to call that in this list. Okay, so the most important part of this is the actual amount that they're paying. That's the part that has to balance in the apply total column. That's the amount you're applying to each of the lines below, each of the patients, each of the dates of service. So that's exactly what you do. You just start at the top and follow that EOB all the way down. So in this line, it's saying we charged them 84. The EOB may say, well, they paid 80 of that, leaves us a balance of 4. On the next line, we charged them 84. They paid us 75. That leaves us a balance of 9. Okay. So if there's a balance left over on our lines, you have a couple of different choices from there. You can choose whether that's going to be a write-off. You could put the whole amount in the write-off column, or you can say, no, part of that is a write-off, part of that I'm going to leave as a balance transfer. And then the balance transfer, you pick who you want to transfer the balance to. So if you're at a clinic where you're collecting copays as more of a credit method, you would transfer the balance of the copays typically to the patients now when you get the payment from the insurance. Okay. How many insurance companies a patient has is always listed here on the right as the number of payers on their file. So you might see the numbers 1, 2, 3. If they only have one payer, you would be on the only one payer then that they have, which means there's nowhere else to transfer it to other than to the patient. So it would either be a write-off or a combination of write-off transfer to the patient. If you see that they have 2 insurance companies, you potentially could move it on to the second. You could say, well, that balance transfer just moves on to the second insurance company, not my patient. Okay. If you happen to have nice, easy, smooth transactions where all of the balances that are left over are going to be moved to the write-off column, if that's something that happens nice and easily, we do have these little shortcut buttons at the bottom where if you click those, they just apply to every line above. Okay. So that's a manual payment. So again, the ERA, the remittance file, does probably 85% of the work for you. It does what it's told to do. So on that line, if it's programmed to say they paid 80, that leaves us a balance of 4, transfer the 4 to the patient, that's exactly what it'll do. You can always come back in and reverse it after it's done, but it'll kind of do what it's told. If you're manually posting, it takes way longer, but you do have more control. You can kind of decide line by line by line as you go where you want the money or the transfer to go. Okay. Another way to make a payment is through the scheduler. You could be directly on that patient's name in the scheduler, go to their activities by service screen, flag some services in here, and then enter your payment directly from here to the same screen. But when you do this under a specific patient to get started, you can only pay for that patient's services, right? That's all that we're looking at on the screen is that one patient. Whereas if you start in the payer, you can pay all the patients that are connected to that payer, so to speak, at the same time. Okay. Does anybody have any questions at all based on what we've talked about so far? It's a nice, for those of you that joined in a little bit later, it's a nice, short, small group today. There's only about 5 of us, so I've left the phone lines open in case you have any specific questions that you want to review.
Can you, we haven't been doing the electronic remittance. Can you kind of give me an idea of what the pitfalls are of that? My impression was there were just a lot of corrections once we imported. Is that accurate?
So, well, maybe yes and maybe no. It all depends on the payer, and it all depends as well as what you're doing behind the scenes to record a copay entry, right? Whether you're doing that split pay method, a credit method, you're charging a separate fee code altogether. But in general, I'll say that that ERA pretty much takes care of 85% of the work for you. 85% of what it was told to do should be correct, but there is a good chance you're probably fixing maybe 10 to 15%.
So once you go through it, you look at, it gives you a preview, like a PDF of the report. Is that how you look at it? Then you go through and just make sure they all got applied as you hoped.
Right.
Okay.
And what does happen sometimes, little tricks that we can change in your housekeeping financial area. Like you'll see that we have these settings for 835 claim codes and payer codes. So what can happen sometimes is, let's say it appears when you run these ERAs that every time it's being told to transfer the balance into the patient's name, you don't want it to do that. You're doing something else at the clinic level where you don't need the ERA to transfer the balance into the patient's name. So you're correcting all those. What we can do is go through the ERA file when it runs, and we can look for that little common code that's telling the ERA to post it to the patient. And let's say we find out code 1234 means transfer the balance to the patient. Then we just go in and we tell the system, whenever we see code 1234, don't do anything with it, or do this instead, or enter this instead.
Got it.
Does that make sense? So we can manipulate the ERA a little bit if you find something's consistent that you're, a lot of times it's doing something and you don't want it to do that. We can probably go in there and see if we can change it a bit.
Okay.
But another thing I would suggest for those of you who are doing their ERA for the first time, if you get that file and you want us to be with you on the phone, just reach out to the support team and set up a time. Say, you know what, guys, I'm doing my first ERA. I'm kind of nervous. I'm not quite sure what it's going to do. I want somebody on the phone with me. And then book a time and a date with them to be on the phone with you, and they'll actually run it with you on the screen.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there any other questions right now from anyone on the phone? Everybody feeling good? Okay. Some of the reports that I talked about today, I didn't actually show them on the screen. Would you guys like to have a look at some of those reports? Are you already running most of those reports I mentioned today, or are some of those new for you? I'll kind of show you a few.
Yeah, if you could go through them. I think that's one of the things I reached out to support, and they've been super helpful, but I thought this might answer the question, so I was waiting. But we've had, Practice Perfect for 5 or 6 years. I feel like there's just a lot of things that that have either come along or not, or I'm not sure we're using it in the best practices at this point. And so, if you could go through what reports in theory, we should be running at the end of the day, what reports we should be running weekly out of the billing piece, we kind of have difficulty once we get into reports being able to click the right buttons to get what we want.
Right.
And find them.
Okay, gotcha. And we'll go through some of these for sure. If you guys do want a list, what I have on my end when I'm training new clinics, especially that are learning the software, I have like a sample of all the reports in a PDF, and I usually send that. And then I send a matching to that, kind of a listing of the reports, like it would say accounts receivable by invoice, and it would have a little description about what that report is actually going to show you. And then I have a list of reports that we suggest that you run at the end of the week and the end of the month and end of the whatever. So if you put your email address into the little chat box on GoToMeeting, I can make sure that I can send that to you for sure.
Will do. Yeah. Thank you. Perfect.
You're welcome. Okay, so the first thing I will forewarn you is that all these reports have about 50 different filters to them. So every time you run a report, should you tick a different box than somebody else, you're going to get a different result, right? So let's have a look at the report we suggest you run every day. And that's under operations, and that's called the daily reconciliation. Now, although we keep saying run it every day, it's called the daily report, we keep saying daily, 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 you can run this report whenever you so choose. We suggest it's a great report to run when you are trying to balance yourself or look for something or just see that summary over a period of time. So I'm actually going to change my date range here and just run this for a whole week's worth of entries. In fact, I'm going to do longer than that because I can't remember when I have entries in my system. So I'm just going to run that for about 2.5 weeks. Now, right away, the first set of filters here, which will really impact your numbers, are the referrals. And I'm not sure that everybody's aware of what these little dates mean or where they come from, so I'll try to describe them to you. So this particular section is saying, when we show you a list or the number of new referrals during this period of time, how do you want to see those referrals? By what date? And there's 3 different choices. So we have referral date, contact date, or assessment date. So I'm going to cancel out of there for a quick second. I'm going to go pick on a fake patient of mine, and I'm just going to show you where those dates are coming from. So if I ask the report to run by referral date, the system is trying to pull all the new referrals based on this particular field. So you have to be careful. If you're asking that report to show new referrals, this patient wouldn't show up anywhere because it can't find a date for it to file, if that makes sense. So this is a date that you actually have to fill out manually. So if you're going to run it by referral date, that's the field, and you need to make sure that all your new entries, all your patients are using that field. Okay. The next particular field is called assessment date. And you would think that that comes from the scheduler, but it does not. It comes from the statistics tab on a patient's profile. So this particular field right here is the assessment date field. And again, that's a manual entry. Somebody has to enter a date into that field for it to show up on the appropriate report. Okay. The third option when you're running new referrals is called the contact date. Now this date, you'll notice sometimes follows you as well to the description of your incident. That particular date is handled by the system, I'll say. It knows when your fingers touch the keyboard and manually entered that patient or that patient's incident into the system, and it records that date. Now you could go back to contact date and change that date if you have a username and password that gives you authority to do that, but that's the other field that it would pull from is contact date. So those are going to be 3 different numbers, as you can imagine, right off the bat, right? If you say, let's run our daily reconciliation report, I want to see all my new referrals from January 20th to now by contact date, that would be different than from assessment date. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay. So from there, remember you have filters. You can run this for all locations at the same time, just your particular location. And then the system will try to spit out some summary numbers for you. So the first summary on this report is your revenue. Those are those little white hands. Again, it's counting all those little white hands. So your codes will be listed on the left. and then it's counting all of them and saying, hey, did you know we did 4 of those, 5 of those, 10 of those, 20 of those? It's also acquainting those as a percentage number against your total number of revenue. Did you know that 44% of your revenue came from the assessment code? Okay. Okay, the next summary looks to the scheduler, and it looks for all the therapists that have appointments in the scheduler, and then it starts counting. Hey, Heather, did you know you had 10 cancels, 4 no-shows, 2 attends? We should never see a pending count for our period of time, right? If we're running a past period of time, the system should never be telling you, I don't know if those people attended or canceled or no-showed. In fact, sorry, we should know if they canceled or no-showed. So it should never be saying, sorry, I'm not sure if they even showed up. So that would be your first red flag if you have anybody in pending. Okay. From there, oh yeah.
I'm sorry, Heather. Sometimes when we run this report, we do get some that are pending, and when we look at them, they look fine. Is there a way to correct that, or is there something that we're missing that causes that?
Sure. So I'd have to probably see the data that you're running it for.
Okay.
But in theory, I'll show you what, like, so there's pending and then there's not charged. So I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. So this would be a pending person on my report. If that little attendance symbol is still sitting at the hourglass, in theory, that's the only way they show up as pending. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yep.
Charge.
And would they show up? I'm sorry. Would they show up as maybe possibly missing charges if that's not checked, or no?
Not necessarily. Like I could,
okay.
It's kind of two separate things, right? So this guy would
okay.
still show up as pending, but he wouldn't show up on the listing and you forgot to charge him.
Okay, gotcha.
Because he's got the little hand there. Does that make sense?
Yep. Okay.
Okay. So if I look at that report, again, I forgot my original date range there, sorry, so we're going to look at that again. My payment summary is tracking all my payments entered. It's breaking it down by client and payer, check, Visa, MasterCard, American Express. So you're trying to balance against this number first, right? If this number doesn't balance, then we want to run a more detailed report called a payment journal. But if this report balances right away, yep, I have $61 in cash, yep, my checks equal $21, I'm probably in good shape. Okay. The main reason I'll say why everybody runs this report so often is because of the whole billing reconciliation section. In theory, we never want to see this section. It's actually broken down into 2 parts. The first part is saying, here's a list of people that had appointments. It doesn't look like they canceled or no-showed. It looks like they had a balance on their account and they didn't pay it. Well, that's just the reality. Not everybody is going to pay you every single day they have an appointment, right? That's fine. You don't want to see those balances getting too large, I would imagine, but that's just the nature of the beast. That's going to happen. The next part of the list is what we never really want to see. This is the part that's saying, I think you're missing the charges. So it's saying these people have appointments on these days with these therapists. They have not marked attendance as a cancel or a no-show. They might still be sitting as pending. They might have been marked as complete, but they don't seem to have a little white hand is what that's saying. So this little column here called no visit, I'm just going to circle that on the screen. Hopefully you can see that. If you get people in there that show up with a little star next to the name, that means we did charge them something. We actually did use the little white hand and we charged them something, but the something that we charged them for isn't a visit. And that's what the system is saying. It's confused. They have an appointment and we charge them for something, but it looks like that something isn't a visit. So that would happen if we charge somebody for something like a copay, but we forgot the treatment or assessment, or we sold them something like a TheraBand ball and we forgot to charge them for the treatments or the assessment. That's how they would show up. When they show up like this with nothing in the column at all, that's the worst case scenario. That's really the patient the system thinks we have to go back and double check. It thinks we've missed them all together. Okay. Okay. So the next report then that we usually check, we go back to the scheduler from there. We say, why did that guy show up on my daily reconciliation report saying I'm missing him? And you would probably find something like this on the scheduler. You'd be like, oh yeah, I didn't mark his attendance. He actually was a no-show and I don't need to charge him. I'm going to say he was sick that day and there's no need to charge him. So now he comes off the report. Okay. And then from there, the next report that we suggest is also under operations. It's called the revenue report. And again, you can run this report every day, every third day, every week, every month, every year. You just change your date range appropriately. Now, if you look at this screen, look at how many boxes, look at how many drop-down lists of options there are, right? Those are all filters. Those are all going to give you a different number, a different result if you filter. So feel free, whatever you're looking for, you filter accordingly. I'm a biller when I run this report typically, so I'm usually using a filter showing me more information. I'm saying also show me all the injury-related information to my patients. I want to see diagnostic codes, injury codes. I want to make sure that we have all those things that we need. And my sad little fake patient here only has one entry. But what you're looking for on here is to make sure the story makes sense, right? This patient, whatever my division is, general insurance, that means I know right away I'm looking for diagnostic codes. I might be looking for modifiers, units, values. So I want to make sure I see that on my entry. If I'm looking at my entry and it's about time and units, I want to make sure my time equals my units. If I have 2 units, I want to make sure I have, 30 minutes, not 45, not 60. Okay, and then usually the faster you check that, every day that you go through that list and have those checks, you're finding issues. And hopefully, as the system is set up in a way where it's helping you along the way, it's feeding information and suggestions to the therapist if they're the ones entering the services, it gets easier and faster every day. And if you notice the same thing happening over and over again, oh my gosh, I'm always having to put a GP modifier on this code. Oh my gosh, it's missing the GP modifier again on my code. There's probably a better way to set up the code then. And then just reach out to us and we can help you through that. Okay. So then all those services, if you don't build them right away, they go directly to your Unbuild services report. And this report is not really a date range. It's more of an as of period of time. As of right now, as of January 1st, what's my total unbilled? And when you run this report, it's going to show you all the services, all the charges, all the white hands that are not yet part of an invoice. They're unbilled, uninvoiced. And sometimes you look at this and you are double checking this, or you're looking at this saying, well, that's weird. I thought I billed Johnny Appleseed. Why is he still showing up on my list? Okay, and we go through the billing process from there. As soon as we bill it, as soon as we send it to an invoice, whether that be electronic, whether that be paper, that becomes accounts receivables by invoice. And again, accounts receivables by invoice is as of a period of time. It's not from this date to this date, it's as of this period of time. This report is aging the invoice. We have our current 30 to 60, 60 to 90, and so on. We kind of want to avoid numbers getting over into this column, right? Those are going to be hard numbers to collect on. They're 4 or 5 months outstanding. When you're running this report, you can filter. You can say, I only want to see my accounts receivable for 60 days and over. I don't want to see the current stuff. I only want to see my accounts receivables by a certain division or a certain payer on the list. Okay. And then as we go through the payments and we're posting, if we want a very detailed report about payments we've entered, that's a financial report called your payment journal. There's also payment application. So payment journal, let me run this for a couple of weeks and see if I can get something to show up on there. A payment journal is just a very detailed entry about the actual payment itself. So in my example here, it's saying this patient had a check that we posted for a total of 21. This patient had a total of $40 via cash that we posted. So it's more focused on the total payment that was entered. It's not really telling us all the dates of the service that paid or the invoice numbers that paid. It's more so just telling us that we posted a $21 payment, a $41 payment, a $21 payment. Okay, and then it totals that at the end. So an even more detailed report would be a payment application report found under finances right above payment journal. And the payment application report shows you where the money was actually applied. So when you run that date range, the system will show you, okay, that $40 payment that we just talked about, 21 here and 21 here, and 21 went here and 21 went here. So it tells you the actual date. Okay. So now apart from that, there's probably 50 other reports that you can access in here. Those are the big ones. Those are the ones we suggest you run every day, some of them every week, some of them every month. And then apart from that, it's whatever else you're looking for. There's tons of great reports under marketing, tons of great reports you can run under scheduling, clinical reports you can run under task and clinical. So if you put your email in that little chat box for GoToMeeting, I will make sure that Michelle reaches out, sends you a copy of those, a sample of those reports, and then the listing that we give out that says when we suggest you run them as well.